Never trust a certainty that requires you to abandon your comprehension. That single sentence, it exposes a fundamental vulnerability in how we all process information and authority in this world we live in. Today, we are deconstructing a powerful psychological tactic, the illusion of expertise. We're going to dissect how the confident performance of knowledge can be weaponized to completely replace actual competence. And this grants huge influence not to the people who've mastered a subject, but to the ones who've mastered performing it. Believe me, this is not just some abstract idea. It's a hidden operating system running in boardrooms, news studios, and our daily conversations. And understanding it is absolutely critical.
This line just perfectly captures the hidden psychological price we pay for living in such a complex world. It defines that very specific, uncomfortable feeling, right? That space where you feel this tension between your own skepticism, that little voice telling you something's off, and the overwhelming pressure to just go along with someone who sounds like they know exactly what they're talking about. It's in that space where the performance of knowledge successfully and often dangerously replaces the real substance of expertise.
So, in this explainer, we're going to run a strategic diagnostic. First, we'll define the performance itself. Then we'll break down the psychological engine that actually drives this illusion. We'll look at the cognitive trap it sets in our own minds and the social threat it uses as powerful leverage. And then, crucially, we're going to arm you with a tactical countermeasure I call the friction protocol, before we land on the one strategic takeaway you absolutely need to remember to protect your own mind. Let's start with an experience I think every single one of us has had. You're in a meeting, a conversation, whatever, and someone is speaking with such absolute, unwavering certainty that you just feel intellectually cornered. You know? A part of your brain is screaming that something doesn't add up, that they've skipped a step, but the sheer force of their confidence creates this intense pressure to just nod along. Well, that tension right there, between your private doubt and the public pressure to agree, that's the battleground where the illusion of expertise operates and wins. Okay, so on the left, you've got the signature of true competence. It's all about clarity, it admits its own limits, it actually welcomes questions because it wants to build a shared understanding. But on the right, you have the total opposite, performed expertise. This thing thrives on ambiguity, it projects flawless certainty, and it treats any question like a hostile attack. See, failing to spot this difference, this complete decoupling of confidence from actual competence, is what makes us so vulnerable. It's how really bad information, delivered with enough aggressive certainty, can completely paralyze our own good judgment.
So how does this whole illusion actually work? Well, it's not magic, it's a machine. It's a psychological engine with predictable parts, and it's designed specifically to bypass your critical thinking. So let's deconstruct that engine, piece by piece.
The main switch, the ignition for the entire engine, is what psychologists call the authority bias. This is basically a mental shortcut our brains use to save energy. Instead of painstakingly verifying every single piece of information, we often just default to trusting someone who looks or sounds like they're in charge. Now, the performer of expertise knows this, whether they realize it or not, and their entire strategy is designed to find and flip this switch in your mind as fast as possible.
And they kick this whole process off by manipulating two key variables. First up is contextual control. This is pure stagecraft. We're talking impressive job titles, name-dropping big institutions, or even just controlling the room to project these cues that all signal I am an authority. Second, and honestly more powerfully, is the performance of certainty. This is that unwavering tone of voice, the dominant, confident posture, the rapid-fire delivery that just gives you no time to think. Together, these two things are designed to activate your authority bias before they've even said a single verifiable thing.
So once your authority bias is primed, the illusionist escalates. They deploy what we'll call the ambiguity advantage. And this is really just the weaponization of complexity. By using dense jargon, abstract concepts, and language that's intentionally hard to follow, they achieve a critical goal. And this is the moment control shifts. The second you start thinking, wow, this is really complex, they must be a genius, instead of, wait a minute, this makes no sense, they've won. They've built a wall that stops you from actually checking their facts. And this brings us to the engine's flywheel, the part that makes this whole illusion self-sustaining and incredibly powerful. The Certainty-Deference Feedback Loop. It's a vicious cycle where their confidence literally feeds on your compliance. When you back down because you feel overwhelmed, that deference acts as a social and psychological reward for them. It validates their performance and encourages them to project even more certainty, which of course makes you even more likely to back down.
Let's just walk through the cycle here. It starts with that initial blast of absolute certainty. This creates a really high cognitive load for you, the observer. It's mentally exhausting to keep up and analyze. So to make it easier on yourself, you defer. Maybe it's just a simple nod. That deference, your silent agreement, is the reward that reinforces their confidence. So what do? They escalate. They pile on more certainty and more ambiguity. And the loop just repeats, getting stronger each time, locking you into this state of predictable obedience.
So we've seen the external machine, but why does it work so well on us? Well, the truth is, this illusion isn't just tricking us. It's exploiting the fundamental operating system of our brains. It works because it offers our minds a deal that's, well, it's almost too good to refuse, the path of least resistance.
Our brains are fundamentally wired to save energy. Thinking hard is literally tiring. So we create these mental shortcuts or heuristics to make faster judgments. And trust the expert is one of our most common ones. The performer of expertise basically offers our brain a cognitive bargain. They're saying, look, don't bother with the hard work of verification. Just accept my authority cues, my title, my confidence, as a substitute for actual competence. It's easier.
And this right here, this is the critical moment. The trap doesn't snap shut because you're convinced by their logic. It closes when you become exhausted by their performance. Your compliance often isn't a conscious choice to agree, but a subconscious decision to offload the difficult, energy-intensive task of critical thinking onto them. You surrender your own understanding, not because you're persuaded, but because you're tired.
But this trap isn't just cognitive. It's also deeply social. The illusionist doesn't just exploit our brain's desire for an easy way out. They weaponize our primal, deep-seated fear of public judgment and social exclusion. This is what we call an identity threat. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. Being cast out from the tribe was a death sentence. We are hardwired to avoid social shame at all costs. The performer leverages this. When they throw up that wall of jargon and complexity, their ambiguity advantage, it's not just to sound smart, it's a direct threat. The unspoken message is crystal clear. Challenge me and you will reveal your own ignorance to the group. You will be the one who just doesn't get it.
Let's just be blunt about it. It all boils down to the fear of looking stupid. This fear is a powerful, powerful agent of compliance. It forces us into a state of silent, status-dependent obedience. The perceived social risk of asking a dumb question feels so much greater than the actual intellectual risk of accepting bad information. And so, we stay silent. And the illusionist wins by default.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem, we've deconstructed the engine, and we understand the psychology. Now we move from diagnosis to defense. This section is all about giving you a clear, actionable countermeasure. We're going to call it the friction protocol. Its only purpose is to consciously introduce friction into what is otherwise a smooth, easy process of intellectual surrender.
Now, before we can deploy any kind of countermeasure, we have to be able to spot the threat in real time. So the first step is always recognition. Just think about everything we've talked about so far. What is the single most reliable signal that you're dealing with performed expertise and not real competence?
Here it is. The signal is a high ratio of confidence to clarity. When you see someone projecting immense, absolute certainty, but you find it absolutely impossible to get a simple, clear explanation from them, that is a massive red flag. Real experts can make complex things simple. Performers make simple things complex to hide their lack of depth. The moment you detect this signal, you know it's time to activate the protocol.
And here is the protocol itself. 3 simple steps. First, recognize the signal. Once you see that mismatch between confidence and clarity, you move to step 2, demand translation. This is your surgical strike against their ambiguity advantage. You say something like, "That's fascinating. Can you explain that to me like I'm a bright 10-year-old?" A true expert welcomes this challenge. A performer gets defensive. Step 3 is the boundary test. Ask a specific question just slightly outside their stated area of expertise. A real expert will comfortably say, that's not my area, I don't know. A performer whose entire identity is tied to being an all-knowing authority will almost always try to bluff or deflect.
Think of this table as your strategic cheat sheet. For every tactic the illusionist uses, you have a direct counter. They use ambiguity and jargon, you counter with a demand for simple translation. They project unwavering certainty, you counter with the boundary test to find their limits. They rely on authority cues to trigger your subconscious biases, you counter with conscious, active skepticism. Look, the crucial point here isn't about being cynical, it's about being strategic. In this context, your skepticism is your shield.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've deconstructed the illusion, we've understood the deep psychology behind it, and we've built a practical defense. So let's distill this entire thing down into the one core strategic insight that you can carry with you.
This is the fundamental truth at the heart of the entire matter. The performer of expertise isn't offering you knowledge, they're offering you cognitive ease. They're offering you a release from the hard work of thinking for yourself. And just recognizing that this is the real transaction, your comprehension in exchange for their comfort, that's the key to arming yourself against it. The path of verification is harder, for sure, but it is the only path that protects your intellectual freedom.
And that leaves us with this final thought, a mental weapon, if you will. The more profound and complex an answer seems, the more vulnerable it is to a simple, clear, direct question. The illusion of expertise is like a fortress built on ambiguity, but its foundations are pure sand. A simple demand for clarity is often all it takes to watch the whole thing crumble.